You're
You on?
good.
All right. The meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the March 11th, 2024 meeting of the City of Asheville Noise Advisory Board. My name is Reb Hazlett, Chairperson of the Noise Advisory Board. Committee members and staff are participating virtually today. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the City of Asheville website and also linked on the Noise Advisory Board page. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. I will now introduce board members and staff who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Board members, as I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. Jessica Thomason, we know she's not here today. Rick Freeman.
Present.
Jeff Santiago. Do we lose Jeff? We may have lost Jeff. David Ledger.
Present.
Okay. Carmelo Papilonio. We know he's not present. Let's give Jeff a minute to see if he can reconnect. Doesn't look that way. Lost his connection, it just showed in my screen. You want to wait a sec? Or there he is. Jeff, you back?
Present.
There you are.
Sorry about that. Present.
Good. Okay. Mostly present and accounted for. Today, we will not approve minutes. We approved the February minutes at the board retreat, and I don't believe the board minutes were distributed for us to read them, to be able to approve them. So I think we will postpone the approval of the retreat minutes until the next board meeting. Noise administrator report, staff report. Todd.
Hello. Don't really have anything other than, what we looked at for numbers at the retreat
Right.
last week. So nothing really new has developed in the
Okay.
few days since then.
All right. Any questions for Todd? Anybody got anything to bring up with Todd? No? Okay. I'll turn to old business then. Jeff, sorry that you couldn't be at the retreat. We had a good, robust discussion. I hope you received the notes that I took from Ashley, where I had recorded one of the main pieces of business, which was for each of us, the board members, to more or less prioritize the things that we felt were important to pursue this year as a noise advisory board. And if you hadn't had a chance to review those, we don't have to dwell on it long today. But the idea is if each of us weigh in, we write them down, we sort of distill those, reach a consensus on the things that we think are important, because we may have an opportunity to go back to the Environment and Safety Committee this year. Councilwoman Mosley informed us that there has been discussion amongst council that there is a review of the ordinance due up this year. So it's timely for us to set our priorities in order and to be able to go back to them with our thoughts on those things that we think will improve and make the ordinance more effective. But until you've had a chance to weigh in, I would suggest that we hold that conversation unless anybody has something in particular they'd like to talk about that. Okay, good. That brings us to vehicular noise, and we're making some pretty good progress there. Part of the distribution today, along with the agenda and a few other items, was a letter that Jessica and I and Todd penned that will go to Asheville Police Department advising the officers on what we hope will happen, what the expectations for a little extra enforcement downtown during that weekend saturation effort would be. Todd sort of tied it to the mechanisms necessary to report so that we can in turn have the data on what's happening and have the information from a citation that can be built into the system, so that if somebody's a repeat offender, something, fines and other measures can be taken to enforce the ordinance. Did everybody have a chance to look at that? I think Justin and I were hoping that we might be able to make a motion and pass that and get that into APD's hands. Any discussion thereabouts?
I read it and I thought it looked great.
I read it as well. I think, yeah, everything looks fine.
Okay. I want to make a motion to any effect passage of that letter to the APD.
I read it this morning, so I agree. I'll make a motion.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
All right. I'll call the vote then. Rick Freeman,
Yay.
yay. Dave Ledger,
Yay.
Jeff Santiago,
Yay.
myself, yay. Okay, good. Todd, one question I did have, we discussed at the retreat the possibility of your having a conversation with members of your department about whatever funding mechanisms may exist out there for the sandwich boards, cautionary sandwich boards located on high traffic corners in the downtown. Did you make any headway there?
I have not yet. I'm going to meet with Mark later this afternoon, and I'll be sure to bring that up to him when we sit down.
Okay, good. Anybody got anything else on vehicular? All right, then we'll go to board composition. This was an agenda item that we had on the retreat, but really didn't have time to circle around to it. Rick, I know this is something that you're interested in. Jessica is very interested in it as well. I think the question is whether the makeup as described in the ordinance is appropriate for what our role is. And then Rick, I think you had some other concerns about it. Would you like to kind of kick off this conversation?
Sure. So the purpose of the way we tried to construct the board was to have 3 representatives of areas that would receive noise and therefore feel like that was a problem and conceivably be complaint sources, and 3 representatives of businesses that can be the source of noise, so that the noise complainants and the noise sources could debate things. And then we called it an audio engineer who would sort of be the neutral arbitrator of, is that a noise or is it not a noise? That's how it was all set up. And we kind of pulled out of our hat, obviously somebody from the music industry. And then I think we said restaurants and construction. Well, we've never had a real construction candidate ever apply or ever make it through the application process to be appointed. We had one restaurant person and she didn't last out the term. So I think that's part of the reason why we're down, people, because those 2 industry areas are not going to sign up, or we haven't done an adequate job to publish it to them to get them to sign up. I don't know which it is. And the more I've thought about it, might be controversial. The more I thought about it, the audio engineer, I don't think we're having a problem interpreting DBA and DBC from a pure technical standpoint. I mean, I think we've all kind of been through that. So I don't know if that's the right 7th position as well. If it were just me making the call, I would rather have somebody who's steeped in the impact of noise on health. That would be, our sort of canary in the coal mine if we're getting we're getting complaints that are turning out to be non-violation, but complainants are saying that this is causing them stress and all that kind of stuff. Right now, we treat that as a very subjective thing, where every board member can have a different opinion about whether a particular style of music or jackhammer sound or something is a stress creator or not. So I just thought we should debate this and see if we can come up with, representation where we're likely to have multiple applicants that we would keep a full 7-person board, because we just haven't really been successful at that.
I'll chime in if I might. Jeff, you had something?
I'm just curious as to what exactly is that person's occupation in relation to what you're recommending.
Yeah, I don't. That's why I said it was off the top of my head. But I mean, maybe the debate is, we could go off and maybe it's a healthcare professional, maybe it's I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I can cite that person by person, in fact, because during the, I won't use the name, but during the Kenilworth struggle with the Mission Hospital noise, there was an individual in the neighborhood who came out as a very powerful spokesperson about the public health effects of noise. And she is, in fact, a public health professional. I'm not sure which hospital she's affiliated with, but she was very aware of the effects of noise on public health, and she was a powerful representative in the effort to link noise with negative health outcomes. And Rick, my position, to me, that would be the ideal person, because it would drill down on what noise really does, what the effect of chronic noise really is. So I think that's a great idea, personally, and as a board member.
So maybe, I don't know, somehow we could try to reach out to people in the public health sector and see if anybody would actually be willing to take that role, because there's a fair amount of continuing research there, and I think almost all of us struggle a little bit to be competent enough to read every National Institute of Health article on the effects of DBC on your ability to learn and it's hard. And if we had that person, then I would feel like I would stop doing half-baked research, and that person, that would be their job, is to point us in that particular direction on what we're actually seeing. But how we go about finding our way into the public health arena to communicate this, that's something that we'd have to figure out how to do, because it won't do us any good if nobody will actually sign up to help.
I would be willing to speak to that particular individual for some advice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. The other thing I'd say that we all need to keep in mind is, since this is dictated in the ordinance, we'd have to ultimately take it through city council for an ordinance change.
Right.
We can't just do it. So we don't need to vote on anything today. We can just argue about whether it's worth Rev spending his time or something like that. But we'd have to work this all through, and that would come up when we're going to be in front of our committee that, hey, these are things that we're thinking about.
Well, I think it plays strongly into several conversations we're having. Jeff, one of my priorities during the retreat was to try and create a rationale for the ordinance. Right now, the ordinance exists somewhat as an isolated document. It just says noise is unwanted, noise is an annoyance, but it's not based on anything. There's no public health science on which to base the ordinance. So it's very difficult to have an argument about what is an annoyance, what is an annoyance, what constitutes a public health threat, because there's no grounding within the document. So in my mind, these two issues kind of go hand in hand.
I could see that. One thought, though, I'm wondering why we would need to replace that health person or health expert with the engineer, since we're not getting any candidates from the other categories. Would an audio professional along with a health professional help us kind of bridge the gap to understanding how the sound works, and then as to why it affects us?
I would agree with that too.
Right. I think for fairness to all the board members, if we kept, let's say, just for sake of argument, that we dumped restaurant industry and left acoustic engineer there, they'd need to disclose their employment, right? Just so we know if they're employed. I'm going to pick somebody who's not presented here. If they're employed by Salvage Station to be their acoustic engineer, then they're really landing in the representative of the performing arts kind of thing, right? But if they're,
I get that.
Yeah, if they're, I don't know, there's probably somebody in Dave's industry that does this, that is all about audio and audio quality inside a vehicle for the vehicle entertainment system. You know, that has no conflict of interest. They're not pro neighborhood, and they're not pro any of the other ones. And
I mean,
just for those of you who haven't gone through the appointment process, the chair and the vice chair only get to make a recommendation to the committee who to pick, and that is only if they take an active role. And Jessica and I had to do that when we lost a bunch of people from the first round of folks that were on this board, because we lost 2 to 4 people like within the first year. So we had to go through that. So we have to be, Reb, you and Jessica have to be proactive.
Sure.
When this time comes, and send strong message to the committee that this is the best candidate for that role. So
we have a candidate now whose qualifications I have not read, but I was holding on that until this conversation. I wonder if the acoustic engineering or a related field could include someone like Dr. Bruce Eichelheimer, or there's another company in town, I think it's called Blue Ridge Consulting, and they specialize in noise analysis. Most of their work is for the military and for Air Force bases, but they also were involved in working with Mission Hospital in their noise missions when Kenilworth was mixing it up with them. But someone in the field of noise analysis would be, if it's not a conflict of interest, might be a beneficial addition in that related field to acoustic engineering, if we could find someone to be on the board.
Right. As I recall, the person who was letting us help and, pointing us at the right documents and all that stuff, ultimately concluded they couldn't participate because they did have a contract with Mission, right, or somebody like that. So
that's correct.
That it's still worth a shot.
That's well, that was 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if they're still employed by them or not, but it just, we can, I don't mind at all contacting either or both of them.
Okay.
All right.
So that still leaves us. So if we found the right acoustic person, we could say they replace the industrial, because industrial could sort of technically be the acoustic thing. What do we do about restaurant industry, right? I mean, what other ideas does anybody have from potentially noise producing business that we think, maybe a better question is that still the right way to think about the non-neighborhood board seats?
No, Rick, I don't remember during our work with the various constituent groups if the restaurant industry was necessarily singled out for their noise making. In all of our work, do you remember them being that?
I think we may have been over influenced by either Alley Cat Social Lounge or One World West. So they serve food, and during the pandemic, there was this whole move to outdoor patio music so that these businesses could stay alive. And that could be where this came from, right? Was that they were all moving outdoors to keep people safe and buying beer. And then that was creating problems for neighbors who used to be living behind, a shoe store that closed and became a bar, and then became a bar with a patio and all that kind of stuff. So that's the best I can remember of what drove us to that. We do always get, even Todd will say we continue to get construction noise problems, typically doing stuff outside their 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. window. But I just don't think we're going to get anybody. I mean, there's how many little construction shops are there in Asheville? Probably dozens, if not hundreds. And I just don't think they're going to sign up to be on a noise board,
Yeah, probably not. Jeff, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to agree with Rick about that whole idea of, I think restaurants were expanding into doing things they weren't normally used to doing to, account for attracting business in that time. And maybe they weren't set up to handle things like live music at a restaurant or on a patio and all that kind of stuff. So that makes total sense to me, Rick.
How would we change the mix, Rick? Or anybody for that matter, what would be the optimal mix of community folks that would make us the most effective?
Can I chime in on that?
Absolutely.
We have a majority of our complaints are coming from multi-family living spaces, and I feel like there's got to be something there where we can kind of tackle that a little bit more as well, and have someone represented in that. I feel like residents of our city that are in that particular living situation aren't always being represented here, or not consistently at least.
Someone have a hand up?
I accidentally did that.
Oh,
mute.
okay.
That was me.
Well, where do we go with this?
I'm not sure.
I'm not either. I would like to have Jessica back in the conversation because I know she has some strong opinions about this as well. Shall we?
We could reach out if Todd was willing to share. There's two parts to Jeff's point, which I think are both pretty interesting. One is what's a management of multifamily? How do they see their noise problems? Because at the retreat, we talked about that a bit, and Todd stated, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Todd, that the effort to reach out to the management companies of the multifamily has really taken a burden off of enforcement. So the complaint goes to the manager and they try to resolve it. Since it doesn't always come to enforcement, we don't really get a voice in this meeting that says what's the problem, and how are they trying to, what are their best practices in trying to mitigate it, or are there no best practices? We kind of said in the in the retreat, even though that makes up almost 50% of the total complaints. I'm saying this for your benefit, Jeff, because you weren't there. We all kind of threw our hands up at the end of the day and said, people will be people. And, you know, we can't get our arms around a particular behavior that you could actually narrow in on and do something. So if we can't get somebody to be on the board, it would certainly be great to invite them into some discussion sessions to ratify what we came up with as common sense. And in terms of the other side, you know, it wouldn't hurt if if we vacated a neighborhood position, it wouldn't hurt if we tried harder to recruit somebody who lives in multifamily, to talk about what it's like there and how that differs, because let's face facts. Within the city limits, the population is going to grow in multifamily housing because there's no damn room to build much in the way of single family housing left inside. So I think that was a really good finding on Jeff's behalf, that I know where Reb lives, more or less. You moved since the last time I had a beer with you. And, you know, and I live in a quiet little neighborhood where I don't hear anything, you know, much. So having somebody that lives in an apartment complex would be a good choice. They would be on the resident side, you know, so I still think there's a good balance between an even number of people who have to produce noise, have to produce sound levels, let's not call it noise, as a part of their jobs, and an equally even number of people who end up consuming sound that causes them stress such that they complain. That balances the board. Otherwise, the majority, that was the point. If you had a majority, if there were 4 residential people and 2 business people, then the board would be able to vote through anything, right? They'd be able to say, drop the limits to 45 decibels and, you know, shorten up the construction period and all that stuff. So having 3 of each meant that there'd always have to be meaningful debate, you know, and one group couldn't just, you know, represent their group.
I think the idea of someone who lives in multifamily is a really good one. Even if we throw up our hands and recognize the difficulty in trying to solve the problem, having that voice, given, as Jeff says, the vast majority of complaints. I mean, if you look at the dashboard this month, it was, you know, way far away, the leading noisemaker. I think that's a good idea, a real good idea. Well, what I would suggest is that we carry this conversation at least one more month and get Jessica back into the conversation. But I mean, it sounds like nobody really disagrees with the fact that we might be able to enrich the board with some different voices. I mean, that seems to be what I take away, or that is what I take away from this conversation today.
Agreed.
Yep. Okay. All right. That was good. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
That takes us to the council report. I don't think Councilwoman Mosley is here today, is she?
Nope.
I do not believe so. Okay. Well, then we won't have a council report, which takes us to the public comment. Ashley, do we have anybody on the line who'd like to speak today?
1 second, I'm checking for you.
Okay.
Switch around tabs. No, we do not.
We do not. Would anyone like to raise any new business or discuss something we haven't brought up today? No. This could be a world record. Short meeting.
You're setting an amazing standard, Rob.
I'm an efficient guy, Rick. I got other things to do.
Yeah.
Much as I love my work on the noise advisory board, I got some other things to do. All right. Well, with there being no further business, I will seek a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second it.
Can we do this by voice or do I have to take a vote?
Voice.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.